Can you hear the music, Robert?
Yes, I can.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
We're gonna need a bigger boat.
We're gonna press on, and we're gonna have the happiest Christmas.
I live in Notting Hill. You live in Beverly Hills.
Can you introduce me as Joker?
I'll never turn to the dark side.
Into the Benoit Blanc. I am your father.
I'm your Uncle Buck.
And here we go.
Well, it would appear the joke was on me. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Phil at the Movies. I'm your host, Phil Walsh, and this show is number 132 of this ongoing podcast. And as you guessed it by the quip, today I am talking about Joker, Folie. And right off the bat, full disclosure, this will be a spoiler-filled episode. I am holding nothing back and will give you my honest take and reaction to the much-anticipated and surely for me, most hyped film of the year. So where do we begin? Perhaps it's best to start at the beginning. Joker, Folie follows up the events of Joker, the 2019 film that garnered $1 billion at the box office, became a pop culture sensation, and earned 2 Academy Awards. Joker is an incredible film. Dark and gritty, it's a Martin Scorsese-inspired character study on arguably the greatest villain of all time, the Joker. The film told the story of a broken man pushed to the edge as the world around him showed no empathy or compassion. The film illustrated the fractures in society, creating a Joker both grounded in our real world, but given enough panache to make him a worthy iteration in the character's long-running history. In Joker, we are introduced to Arthur Fleck, played by Joaquin Phoenix, a man whose arc showed a beaten-down individual, mocked and laughed at by the world around him, who ultimately, through choice and circumstance, became the iconic Batman villain. The movie is a great tragedy in a way, while also fulfilling all the necessary elements associated with a comic book movie. Joker, in my humble opinion, is a perfect capstone, serving as both a cautionary tale and a satisfying take on one of the most fascinating villains ever created. Surely, a sequel would be just as bold and provocative, right? Well, enter Joker, Folie. Now, I think it goes without saying, I have been on the Joker 2 bandwagon for quite some time, and given my hype and interest in this film, I have tried to square myself away from all of the reactions that were leading up to the film, though because of the age in which we live with social media, it's almost impossible to avoid such takes unless you are able to unplug from social media entirely. But nevertheless, I was aware of a lot of the discourse, shall we say, about this film going into its opening last week. And for me, I don't let negative reviews or Rotten Tomato scores influence my opinion. I watch a movie for what it is. And that, my friends, is what I did with Joker, Folie. And I can say right off the bat, it is no laughing matter. The much-anticipated sequel is disappointing at best and regressive at worst. The film lacks any identity, unlike its successful predecessor, and finds itself adrift, moving from scene to scene without adding anything to the conversation or even saying anything of substance in the meantime. The Joker sequel plays like a bad joke, no build-up and certainly no punchline. If anything, the joke is on the audience, and certainly feels like the joke is on me for believing this sequel could be a worthy follow-up to the 2019 masterpiece. In short, and it frankly pains me to say it, this movie should not exist. Not because it is a bad movie, though that is a reaction many moviegoers are having from the experience, but because the film cannot justify its own existence. Joker Folie Deux offers no new narrative. The story is flat and almost non-existent. Much of the film plays, in fact, like an extended epilogue to the original, though instead of tying up loose threads, the movie seems to go out of its way to either rehash elements from the first story without adding any new twist or plot development, or perhaps, and this is the movie's biggest cardinal sin, it regresses and undoes much of the arc established in the previous film and leaves us, it certainly left me, both baffled and exhausted by the end. This is a Joker-less sequel, and for fans of the comic books and other cinematic iterations, or even those curious based on how the first film ended, this movie will leave you unfulfilled. The arc established by the first film is abandoned in favor of telling a quasi-story that is more about stalling any narrative momentum in favor of an attempt at a character study. The problem is the movie is not interested in asking further questions or putting the Joker or Arthur Fleck under the microscope. There is an inkling at some identity crisis going on with Arthur as he wrestles with whether or not he can fully become the Joker character, but the movie wastes our time and instead drags out the runtime with extended musical numbers and a vapid, drama-less courtroom showdown. Now, on that point about musicals, because yes, full disclosure, Joker Folie Deux is a musical. Despite evidence to the contrary by the filmmakers and some of the cast, this is a musical, and it is frankly unlike any musical I have ever seen. Now, if you are a fan of the genre, if you are a fan of films like La La Land, Grease, Singing in the Rain, or even Chicago, Joker Folie Deux, I promise you, is like none of those films. In fact, to call this movie a musical is almost comical. The characters of Joker and Harley Quinn, played by Lady Gaga, more on her in a moment, break into song at random. And yes, there are the occasional set pieces akin to the musical starring Fred Astaire back in the day, and there's even nods to the Sonny and Cher variety shows of the 1970s. All of this is more and mere window dressing to the film and doesn't add anything of substance. It is a creative swing, but it is a swing that ultimately misses. The musical clutter weighs down an already directionless story, and as is the tradition in this format where music is used to further the plot or expand a character's inner thoughts or turmoil, here the musical aspects leave us shaking our heads and asking, why? Why? Characters are talking and without question or warning break into song. There is a moment early on in the film after Joker and Harley have met for the first time, though she's actually called Lee in the movie, but that's more of an aside. They're meeting in a prison viewing room, so to speak, and during this intense discussion, Lee reveals that after a nightly visit that she had inside Joker's cell, again, dispel any kind of logic at this point, but she reveals that she is pregnant. Now, that's a major development. It's a major turning point for the plot, or so we think. The problem is the plot line is abandoned. It's never mentioned again, and before anything can really marinate or take hold, the characters break into song and start essentially singing to each other, but it's without any grandstanding or elaborate set pieces to sort of distinguish whether or not this is going on inside their heads or inside just actuality. It is a very confusing decision that ultimately stalls any kind of momentum the film might be gaining at any particular moment. It just sort of flatlines it, and we're again left scratching our heads saying, why are you doing this? The first film, of course, is famous for trolling the audience, and I mean that in the best possible way. It trolls the audience with the subjective question over reality or fantasy. What's going on in Arthur's head? Is it real? Is it not real? And that's sort of the fun nature of the movie. Here, it just seems like the movie is trolling us for the sake of trolling us. The music is odd, the songs are outdated, and there's really no reason for its existence in the movie other than, as I said, a creative choice that, while I applaud, because I think it's important for any film, particularly a comic book movie, to take bold creative swings, this one is so horribly executed to the point that I never knew whether to laugh or cringe. Again, I go back to the scene where Harley reveals that she's pregnant, and then rather than sort of taking this to the next logical step or advancing the plot, the characters just sing to each other in a rather awkward and at times cringe-inducing manner. Now, on to the Lady Gaga of it all. Much of this film's hype centered around her appearing in the film as the classic character Harley Quinn. And she was promising to bring her own take on the character, a fresh interpretation, one unlike any version seen before. And certainly the character is an important player in the story of the Joker. If you're familiar with comic books or other stories in films or TV, Harley is an important part of the Joker's overall narrative, and certainly is an important character in her own right. She has her own arc and storyline and background that has been developed and expanded over the years, ever since she was created for the Batman animated TV show in 1992. Now, I want to say right off the top, because I have seen criticisms hurled at Lady Gaga for this film's failing. She is not the problem with this movie. Underline it. She is not the problem with this movie. I think under different circumstances, she could have brought something fascinating and incredible to the role. Here, Harley, or Lee, is presented as the manipulator, in love with the Joker persona as opposed to Arthur himself. She's an exaggerated fangirl, almost like the Manson followers back in the day, which I have to say is a unique twist on the character, who is generally played as a sympathetic character at the start of her arc. She's usually a psychiatrist working with the Joker, who gets manipulated by him and turns into his accomplice / lover. The problem with this version is that she's underwritten and ultimately underutilized. We are meant to think that she is this obsessive fangirl of the Joker, and that's just it. We're meant to think that because the movie wastes any potential exploring her character outside of window dressing. There are scenes in the film where she is in full Harley Quinn attire, or I should say Harley Quinn attire for Todd Phillips' version of Gotham City and these characters, and all she's doing is sitting in the background of Arthur's trial, which dominates the large portion of the film pretty much for the second hour and then some. And it's a real shame because outside of her few song and dance numbers, she is given nothing to do. She's given nothing of substance to advance the plot or any sort of character motivations that could be at all compelling or interested for us. There's not even a sense of a plot twist or any kind of contrivance even. She just sort of is there for the sake of being there. And it's a real shame because particularly with this being a grounded, gritty version of Gotham City established in the first film, it would have been fascinating to see where she's going, given that we are first introduced to her as an inmate in the asylum, or a patient in the asylum, who strikes up a connection with Arthur and is drawn to him because of his Joker persona. But again, the movie sort of introduces ideas but never fully commits to them, if you will. And over again, I kept saying to myself, what a pity, what a shame. This movie tries to be this big budget musical but never fully commits enough to embrace the creative madness that such a scenario could unfold, particularly when you have a character like the Joker, who is larger than life and at times flamboyant and colorful. The music in this particular case is more just window dressing. There's one particular scene when Arthur is in the courtroom for his trial where Phoenix breaks out into a song, the cover version of the song "The Joker," and it's elaborate. It's probably the best one in the entire movie, but again, it sort of happens at random. There's no build up to it, and again, I say that's sort of the flaw that this movie makes by committing to the idea of a musical. It doesn't understand the trappings or tropes that are associated with the genre, so it just feels awkward and out of place. And again, if you didn't know this movie was a musical, I can understand how it would be totally off-putting and jarring, because there's no warm-up, there's no warning, if you will. Like in most cases, you sort of get the idea when a character's about to break out into song. Here, things just sort of happen without any declaration, and it is confusing and frankly unsettling, because it's not even kind of established within the world of this movie. There's no basis for it to exist other than to be merely a creative choice. And so the movie is divided into largely two set pieces: Arkham State Hospital, where Arthur is incarcerated following the events of the first film, and the courthouse, where much of the dramaless events play out. And that's, again, where the movie wastes any potential. A court hearing or trial of the Joker could have been fascinating, particularly with Joaquin Phoenix holding center stage. But the movie devolves into this sort of generic, run-of-the-mill court case where all they end up doing is rehashing moments and events from the first film without any new insight or intrigue. And so that's what I mean. It plays like an extended epilogue where we're saying, okay, we already know this information, or okay, we're just repeating ourselves again. The movie has nothing new to say. And while there are flashes of brilliance, particularly when Arthur decides to represent himself in full Joker attire, and he sort of impersonates a Southern lawyer. That was funny. That was really intriguing. But again, the movie sort of takes two steps forward and then stops, and we're just constantly left asking ourselves, what is going on here? What is the point of this? Is this meant to be an exaggerated, almost twisted version of La La Land? Is it meant to be some sort of compelling court drama, like My Cousin Vinny? Even like what exactly is going on here? I mean, not that My Cousin Vinny is like a Few Good Men or something, but it's not even trying to justify itself on that end. And I kept saying, what are we doing here? What exactly is going on? And I mentioned earlier, the film regresses in a way, not only with where Arthur's character is at the start of the film and ultimately throughout it, but this film also denounces the original ending from Joker, with Arthur facing a personal reckoning brought on by the fact that he has become the Joker, or is about to become the Joker. Now, this is a fascinating concept, and perhaps without the musical aspects and with more emphasis on diving into the character's psyche, we might have gotten another brilliant character study here, but instead we're denied that aspect too, which again begs the question that I've been sort of hinting at: who is this film for? Is it for fans of the original? Surely not. Based on the stalled character arc and even the regression of the story, you'll be left disappointed. Is this for fans of musicals? Well, you're going to be left jarred and frankly confused. Is it for fans of Lady Gaga? I'm sorry to say she is underutilized in this film, and it's a waste of her talents and time. Is this movie for people interested in character deconstructions? That seems to be a popular trope, if you will, appearing in a number of movies across the spectrum. The problem is, I think this movie wants to deconstruct the mythology, but the problem is it never commits itself to be both entertaining and thought-provoking, which again is a massive shame. So who is this film for? What is its purpose? The answer for me is non-existent, or if there is an answer, it's muddled, I should say, underneath all of the clutter and rubble that exists from the extravagant dance numbers which come at random and the sort of, attempt to be a compelling court drama that ultimately plays like a rehearsal for debate prep in high school. Now, I will give some positives because, this has been a very critical review of the film, and I want to try and at least shine a light on some of the positivity for it. The cinematography by Lauren Shearer, who did the first one, it's brilliant, it's striking. Given the fact that we have two main set pieces, the fact he is able to make those images pop and retain the gritty, realistic lens that was applied to the first film, hats off to him. He really does a remarkable job with it. The score by composer Hildur Gudtner is haunting. It's an ominous, violin-heavy score, much like the first film. It's beautiful, it's tragic, it fits with the character that was established in the first film. Now, as I said, Lady Gaga is largely wasted in the film. She works with what little she is given, and again, she is a natural talent. She can sing, she can act, and what few moments she is given the spotlight, she is of course always a treat. But again, I kept wanting to see more of where she could take this character. The rest of the supporting cast is largely, favorable. Brendan Gleeson, who plays one of the guards at Arkham, he is the most memorable and certainly has the most screen time outside of the two main leads. He's definitely a character that's going to leave you, entertained at the start, but as the story goes along, he's a character that you're going to probably grow to hate if you have garnered any interest in the film by the midway point. But of course, at the center of all of this, Joaquin Phoenix, who, despite the problems with the non-existent story and sort of the directionless nature of it, he turns in a masterclass in acting. He never phones in a performance, even with a thin story. And that's what we have here with Joker, Folie, Deux. Phoenix makes the most of it, and he does give it his all. He is carrying this film for what it is, and it's unfortunate because, unlike the first film, this one does not seem interested at all in expanding or exploring his character, and it does result in giving him less to do by the end of the film. Which does bring me to the end, the climax, if you will. As I said, there was this internal debate that's hinted at but never fully expanded upon enough for us to be invested in the journey. At the end of the film, after Arthur has decided to represent himself in court, he renounces his Joker identity, which is a fascinating concept, and that's a real great subversion of the expectations, which I can applaud. I think that is a bold choice to do. The problem is the movie, again, never bothers to construct any kind of filling climax that could justify such a shocking twist, if you will. It's a twist without a twist. It's just information that is meant to shock you, but because there is no build-up to it, it just sort of plays off like an information label on the side of a can. And that's really disappointing because the first film did that so well, where it would take you on this journey. So when there were natural twists and turns in the story, you felt not necessarily prepared, but you could understand where this was going. This movie never knows where it's going and just sort of makes things happen at random, throw in a few song and dance numbers and think that that will tie it all together to create some sort of theme or identity, and it ultimately accomplishes none of those things. There's no internal struggle. There's no battle of the soul of Arthur. The movie leaps from scene to the next, sprinkling, as I said, erratic musical numbers, and then tries to justify these, larger themes, but it's as effective as a watered-down picket sign left in the gutter after a protest. It's sort of like, who cares by the end of it? So back to the climax, if you can call it that, after Arthur has accepted his responsibility, if you will, and renounced his Joker identity, the trial is interrupted by a, hold on for it, massive explosion, presumably caused by the legion of followers Arthur has amassed as the Joker. Now, who set off the bomb? We don't know, nor does the movie bother to care. There's hints that Arthur has created almost a cult of personality around him with the citizens of Gotham. And that would have been a fascinating angle to have explored for the sequel. But again, much like everything else, it's left as window dressing, and the movie doesn't seem to bother enough to give us anything to justify what the purpose is. So again, when the explosion happens, I mean, it was hinted at in all the trailers, so it's not shocking. But when it arrives in the film itself, it's sort of like, okay, a whimper and no bang. It's completely disappointing. And again, it goes nowhere. And that, again, is the problem. There's no investment in this larger world that has been created around Arthur. And as a result, the film gives us no reason to care about Arthur's own struggle, because it doesn't even bother to answer any of the questions set up by the first film, and sort of, again, either stalls the momentum or regresses and tries to rewrite history in a way. And this leads to my ultimate point about the film feeling flat. Arthur's story, if you can call it that, is a circle in this film. He starts at Arkham at the beginning, and he ends at Arkham in the beginning. Now, that is a narrative choice that has happened with many films. Again, across genres. A character starts in one place and ends up at the same place at the end. The problem is here, there is no journey. There is no arc for us to follow. There is no tension. Even, as I said, when the courthouse is demolished and he wanders through the streets of Gotham before being rejected by Harley, he's captured again. And as I said, she rejects him at the end of the film because he's no longer Joker. But it's one of those situations where it feels like an information dump. The movie just has to get all of this info out to us so it can wrap everything up. At a nearly 2.5-hour movie, it wastes so much time with utter nonsense that by the time you reach the climax, you're both exhausted and frustrated by everything that you have watched. And again, that is the narrative flaw of this movie. If there was any shared madness between Arthur and Harley, again, the title is Folie à Deux, which loosely translates to shared madness between two people. The movie clearly just uses that as a pretentious marketing trick, because there is no interest or intent to explore the minds of Arthur and Harley, particularly if they have some shared delusions or madness. If there was any interest of showing a, pardon the expression, bad romance between them, if there was any forethought or character motivation or progression, we as the audience would have been engaged. But again, as I said, events happen, and when they happen, we're left baffled at how we arrived at such a conclusion in the first place, because the movie is essentially trying to tell you anything. It's not showing you anything. It's that classic rule of storytelling 101, show, don't tell. And in this particular case, we're just told things, and that's the end of it. The movie doesn't bother enough to care about the audience's intelligence or interest along the way. Now, as I said, ultimately the film ends as it starts, a punchline without much of a punch or even a line. And Arthur, spoiler alert ahead, though this has been disclaimed at the start, in the final frames of the film is, hold on for it, killed by a fellow inmate. And we are only shown this individual once or twice early on in the film, and as Arthur dies on the floor, the murderer laughs maniacally, and while out of focus, he carves up his face a la Heath Ledger's Joker, and the film ends. Now, that ending itself is bizarre and feels like a classic case of awkward fan service. I'm not even sure what the purpose of that ending was, because again, we're not made to care in the story. There is no story. The ending is the most bizarre choice in a film, frankly, that is littered with bizarre choices. The choice, if you will, to shoehorn quasi-fan service by making Arthur essentially the prototype Joker, not the real Joker, but essentially an inspiration for the eventual Joker, feels like lazy writing, and it arrives out of left field given the original movie's narrative, which clearly established him to become the criminal mastermind, the Joker. So you've now spent 2 movies watching somebody who never actually becomes the Joker. I mean, I guess applause for being bold there, but I'm not sure it's quite the bold strike that Todd Phillips and company thought so with this particular decision. Again, I could go on. I've gone on already long enough as it is with this film. I will just say that it is a rudderless and boring event. Joker, Folie, Deux bids au revoir to any engaging narrative in favor of a stagnant story, baffling musical numbers, and a frankly skeletal attempt to understand one of the most compelling villains in all of fiction. We are left laughing both as a result of the film and what a complete waste of time it ended up being. Now, while this movie does not destroy the first film, as some have indicated, it does offer nothing worthy of our time. The film, as I said, has no interest in the characters of Arthur or Harley, and any insight into the Joker is mired in utter pretension that any themes or ideas that are there on the table feel force-fed and painfully heavy-handed. There is nothing subtle in this film, and that is, again, another step down from the original. And so I will just cry mea culpa. The first film should have been a one and done. I know it's amazing to hear me say it, being the champion of this film prior to its release, but I feel anyone who said that the sequel was unnecessary was right, and I can humbly admit I was wrong. And it's not from the level, well, the movie just disappointed me, which it did. Narratively, it makes no sense. It offers nothing new. If anything, it's a step backwards when, in the best case, a sequel should be trying to move forward. And that is not happening here. It is not a case of just a simple, quote-unquote, rehash of the film, as a lot of sequels tend to be. This is just a flat, circular story that ultimately accomplishes nothing. It is a film that sadly failed in my eyes. It failed to match the height of the original. It failed to be anything provocative, though I guess based on the largely negative reception to this film from critics and audiences alike, it is provocative in that way, though I do not think as the filmmakers intended it to be. Now, there is a point in this film near the end where Arthur is no longer Joker, and while on the famous steps first seen and utilized in the original film, says to Lee, who is breaking in and out of song, again, as the characters tend to do throughout this movie, he says, "I don't want to sing anymore." And to that I felt like saying, preach, Arthur, preach. And further, I don't want to talk about this movie anymore, which is certainly not where I thought I would be 6 months ago, let alone a week ago. This is art. This is a response to art. This is a response to a movie. That is Joker, Folie, Deux. What a world, what a world. And perhaps it is best said by the song, "That's Life." And as funny as it may seem, some people get their kicks stomping on a dream. But I don't let it get me down. 'Cause this fine old world, it keeps spinning around. And we'll keep spinning around next week, everybody, when we do this all over again for the love of movies.
The whole world smiles with you when you're laughing, when you're laughing. The sun comes shining when you're crying, you bring on the rain, so stop your sighing. Be happy again, keep on smiling, 'cause when you're smiling, the whole world smiles with
All copyright material used or referenced in this show belong to the rightful owners and is made possible by the Fair Use Act. Thank you for listening to Phil at the Movies.
When you're smiling, why the whole world smiles with you. When you're laughing, the sun comes shining through. But when you're crying, you bring on the rain, so stop your sighing. Be happy again, just keep on smiling, 'cause when you're smiling,